Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last class. I don't know about you, but I'm just really blown away at where the time has gone for this semester. It's not our last class, but it will definitely be our last lecture for this course. And so I'm pretty excited about how we're going to close things out today. I think it'll be a blessing to you. Now, I know that you probably got a few emails from me this weekend, just getting caught up with making sure that I got through all of your assignments and that they were returned to you with with your progress and how you're coming along. So I'm really pleased at how things have gone. I'm really pleased that the responses that I've gotten from the homework assignments, and just to see how you are grasping the information and being able to then give it back to me. I think you have progressed overall. The class has progressed very well. I think we should give ourselves a hand. It's great. It's great. I know there were a few hiccups in the road along the way for some of you with your scheduling and sometimes not being able to get the homework in time. And then if it was way past the time, I unfortunately had to make the decision, because according to the rules, we can give grace in some situations, but for the most part, if it's past a certain time, if it's way past deadline period, we wouldn't be able to give credit for the assignment. But needn't to worry. I think, as I said, I think we've had an incredible journey, and that everyone has done very, has done well. And so we are just going to go ahead from here. And so let me talk a little bit about what's going to happen. Even though, as I said, this is our last lecture, it definitely is not. I think we have a few more classes afterwards, but the next few sessions that we have are going to be review and in preparation for the final exam. So I'm probably somewhere going to throw another pop quiz in there someplace. I'm even thinking about perhaps doing something a little different that I've done with this class. I've done it with most of the other classes I've had, but you've not experienced it. So I'm thinking of putting together something probably for next week, not next week, but the week after Thanksgiving, when you come back, just to kind of see how you're doing, and how you can give the information to me just from a different perspective. So it'll be fun, so don't worry about it. So let's get into our lesson for today. This is lecture number 10, and today we're talking about reproducing. And there's a lot to say about reproducing, but for the sake of time, I think I've narrowed it down to just a few points that I think will be helpful for us as we are looking at our roles as leaders in the world, in whatever capacity of leadership we may find ourselves in. But actually, I found that, and I'm sure most of you will agree, that the information that we have covered over these last few weeks are things that we can apply in our everyday lives, things that can make a difference in how we manage our lives, our time management, our focus, things that we give our attention to, how to be able to prioritize our lives in different elements of dealing with people and relationships and work and management. So all of that comes into play. So I think it's really good information. But certainly my goal was for those of us who are in active leadership roles, where other people are looking to us, other people are having expectation from us. There's a demand being made upon us to be in the forefront as a leader in a capacity. And so I think that I think the information, well, my hope is that the information really proves out to be something that you can use in those capacities as leader. So we're looking at today, as I said, reproducing. And obviously we'll start, as we always do each week, with a definition. of just a simple definition of the word reproduce. And it is to make a copy or representation, duplicate, a close imitation of something, to make a copy of something, to make a representation of a duplicate or a close imitation of the original. So we reproduce. There in the Bible, it has the scriptures. There are plenty of scriptures about reproducing. Some of my favorite readings are from the book of Genesis, where it first all happens. So I'll read to you now, just from a Hebrew definition, the Hebrew language definition of the word reproduce. A biblical definition in Hebrew, to generate offspring. Simple. To generate offspring. To generate. To bring forth from yourself something that is not you, but it is you. It is you. It is your heart. It is your concept. It is your view. It is your successes. It is you, and that from that perspective that you bring forth, and it's something that you again reproduce from and of yourself. Whatever the things are that have made you as a leader, whatever the things that you have learned as a leader, whatever challenges you may have overcome, and how that has shaped your perspective on leadership, and how that has shaped you as how you approach leadership, how you approach people, how you approach ideas, how you approach new concepts. But this idea of reproducing brings all of who you are and who you've been made to be. Whether it's you're at the top of the food chain in leadership, or at the bottom, or someplace in the middle of it. But whoever you are and whatever you are, one of the greatest things about this life that we live, especially those of us who live a life of faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and believing in God, and having relationship with God, one of the most unique things about us is that we can take who we are, having patterned ourselves after who we believe our Creator is, God, and then reproducing who we are in the life of someone else. And so when you're talking about reproduction, you cannot leave out the idea of succession, because as you're reproducing something after your kind, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but as we go through this idea of reproduction, we see that we're leaving something. We're bringing forth something. We're bringing forth something that we want to be able to leave even in our absence. And as a good leader, let's say that you, as the owner of a company, or the manager of a company, or a representative holding a key position in an organization, and at some point, at some aspect of your connection in this organization, the buck stops with you. Well, if you had to step away from that, if you had to take a leave of absence for whatever reason, or if you took another assignment in a different location where you couldn't physically be where you are today in your leadership role, then you would want to be sure that you had someone in place that could manage, that you have trained, that you have poured into, that you have mentored, that you have built certain principles. They have your heart for the organization. They have the level of integrity. They are trustworthy. Those are the kinds of things that we want to work at producing and reproducing in our workspace and in our roles as leaders into the lives of other people. Those are the things that we want to leave behind if we are removed from a situation for whatever reason. And we want to see the success of it continue on. Then we want to be able to say that we have reproduced and we have brought forth the good and the betterment for the organization in the lives manifest in the lives of the people that we leave behind, that will succeed us in those roles of leadership. We looked at a definition, scripture definitions in the Hebrew language, and again, it basically says to generate offspring, to generate offspring, to make many use. The scripture reference here is in Genesis. And again, the Bible has a lot to say about reproducing and reproduction. God has a lot to say in the book of Genesis from the very beginning. So the scriptures that we're going to be looking at, the ones that we're making our foundational scriptures for today, is found in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 through 27. That is Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 through 27. And you can just jot it down for now or make a note of it. We're going to come back to it and we'll look at it even a little bit closer and what it says. The next one, Genesis, obviously found in the Old Testament in the Bible. And then in what is referred to as New Testament Bible, begins with the book of Matthew. So again, at the beginning of this New Testament, at the beginning of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament, we find again this idea of reproducing. And we find it in Matthew chapter 28, verse 19 through 20. Now the words we won't find the word reproduction or reproducing necessarily, but the concepts are the same. The ideas are the same. For instance, in the book of Genesis, it talks about reproducing and bringing forth of your own kind, bringing forth something that is just as you are, a type of who you are, of what you are. And then in the book of Matthew, we see the same concept when Jesus walked the earth. The word that would be representative of the idea of reproducing is making disciples, making people, or training, or reproducing, or bringing forth disciples, those who would now be the same type that Jesus was as he walked the earth. So we're going to look at both those, and we're going to see some interesting things today just from a technical, psychological perspective. We're going to be looking at today a concept, and I, as I read through and studied through from a physiological and a psychological standpoint on this idea of reproducing. Obviously, the one thing that stood out the most was the idea of reproducing physically, the reproduction process. Where someone conceives, a man and woman get together, they conceive a child, and they bring forth another human being. And and that's very important. So we can't negate that part of the reproduction process. I mean, that's where it all started with God. It was a physical reproduction. But we want to look at it from the standpoint, I want you today to think conceptually. I want you to think from the standpoint of where you sit today in your life and the kinds of things that you are bringing forth in your realm of leadership. So what are you producing? What are you reproducing? Or are you reproducing in your leadership? And so we want to talk about the importance of that and some things to help us to see how we can better ourselves in making sure that we are reproducing the right kinds of things and the right kind of people that we want to see and that we want to be a part of whatever our area of leadership is. And so this one concept I studied out, and I thought it was very interesting. Now, again, this is a very secular perspective. But at the same time, as we said before, when we begin to make parallels from the spiritual to the natural things, we see there are a lot of likenesses. There are a lot of ideologies that are taken from the Bible, because everything that mankind has developed or come up with, all the sciences, all the technology, all of those things are secondary to the Bible, because we have had the Bible far longer than we have had man and his development and his progression over the centuries and over the years and over the ages. It's interesting to see how certain parts have been taken from the Bible and integrated into others' natural ideas of how life works and how things work, and even how leadership works. But this particular one I thought was very interesting. It's called the message learning approach. The message learning approach. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about reproducing in leadership, bearing fruit in leadership, meaning other people's lives and how us as a leader, what it looks like in the life of someone else as they're developing in their own roles of leadership. Message learning approach was proposed by a U.S. psychologist. His name was Carl Hovland, and you can read about Mr. Hovland. His ideas were presented and introduced into the arena of psychology between 1912 and 1961. He implies that a change in attitude can be likened to message learning. A change in attitude. So what does a change in attitude have to do with reproducing something? Everything. Because in order for you to reproduce something in a person, or to reproduce an idea, or to reproduce a position in an individual, that means change is going to have to take place. Because as I just said, the key word is individual. We're all individuals. We all think differently. We have different worldviews. Some of us are a little bit more developed in a particular area, perhaps, than someone else is. Whatever your area of leadership is, if you are the main person, you are the supervisor, if you are the manager, if you are the owner, that means then you are a little bit more well advanced than people that you have working along with you. I won't say people working under you. I'll say people working along with you. But you are at an advantage because you apparently have more skills. You apparently have more information. You've gotten more time, more tenure. You've got a little bit of leverage than the average person that's just coming in. So you're the person in charge of this. So this particular concept of message learning, it requires change. It requires a change in attitude. It requires a change in ideas, in how people do, how people act. Because now what you want to do as your role as a leader, you want to take the things that have gotten you to this place of leadership, and you now want to reproduce those things in the lives of someone else who may have their own mind and may have their own ideas. But which is why it's very key that you have people, especially if you're in a situation where you have interns, or you have people that you are mentoring, again, people that are learning in a learning mode from you. You know, you have a person coming onto an assignment and there's a 90-day, 60-day probationary period. All these things are key. Well, during those periods and those times, you're reproducing something into them. You're introducing and you're reproducing different concepts and ideas and methods into these people's lives. So the message learning process, in that an attitude can be changed, but only if the message stimulating this change is clear. So Mr. Hovland says that the message learning approach is very good when it comes to we can use that when it comes to leadership and reproducing. But he's saying that this message, whatever your message is, whatever you're trying to convey, whatever your goal is for your people, whatever your goal is for your organization, he's saying that the message of it has to be very clear in order for it to affect and to bring about change. And he uses the word an attitude change. An attitude change. And most change, if not all change, but in many 99.99%, change comes with attitude. It's our attitude. It's how we carry what we carry. It's how we approach it. And so there's some attitude shifting and changes that needs to take place in the process of reproduction. It says here that the change must be, the message must be clear in order for there to be change. So we can't go in stammering and unsure, which is why it's very important to if you're not the best communicator, you got the best job, but you may not be the best communicator in that job, then a wise person would do two things. They will put themselves in an environment so that they can enhance their ability to communicate. Number two is, again, once you reproduce yourself, or in that reproducing, in that mentoring process, you find someone that is skilled in communication as you're growing in that particular area. Because many times, just because we are the people in charge, we have this sense of weight, this weight upon us, that we have to become something to all things. We have to be it, the sum total of it all. In reality, we know that's not true, because that means that then we're without flaw, we're without lacking in ability. But in roles of leadership, communication is very key. You'd have to be able to verbally communicate. You'd have to be able to, this is probably an improper way to say it, but you'd have to be able to bodily communicate, if that's a word, bodily. But you'd have to be able to have good, strong written communication skills. But communication and it has to be clear. You have to be able to, we talked about this in one of our previous sessions, where if in roles of leadership, you have to be able to cast vision. You have to be able to when a person walks away and you're giving instructions, they need to be very clear. And sometimes we can bark out instructions to, if not careful, we'll just bark out instructions or run through our policies and procedures and not give room for people to ask questions. But we'll have to be patient enough to make sure that our message is clear when we are talking about reproducing or getting someone to buy into the reproduction process. Mr. Hovland says that there are 5 steps to this process, and these I found very interesting. We're going to go over these 5 steps to the process of message learning. The message is whatever it is that you're wanting to accomplish. The message is that you are wanting to reproduce yourself, your business model, your ideas, your concepts, your wisdom, your knowledge, your understanding, your approaches. You want to reproduce that in the minds of others. And here in this message, these 5 steps, I want you to you think about it. You'll be able to let me know if you see how each one of these. I'm going to go through them very quickly here. Well, not very quickly, but I am going to just move through them directly. And you think about Again, I want you to make this applicable to where you are in your world, in your life, in your business, in your company, in your education arenas. I want you to make this applicable to you as a leader and in your endeavors in leading other people. So this, again, let me tell you what they are so you can be sure that you have it. This is the concept of message learning approach to people, the message learning approach in bringing about change. And that is to ensure that what you want, or what you're looking for in the change, or what you're trying to establish and develop, that the message is clear. And so these are the 5 steps to this process of getting clarity, of getting people to buy into, of getting people in the mindset, in the right mindset. Here are these 5. The first one is exposure. The individual must be physically exposed to the message. They have to be exposed to it. And this message now, once the message has been spoken, once the message has been written, the message then has to be demonstrated. Once the message has been spoken, it has been written, it must be demonstrated. So this then secures the exposure that a person can have to the message. So the message is not always, it just doesn't stop with speaking something. I'm not, that's great to speak it and to communicate it. It also has to be demonstrated and communicated through demonstration. So there is the element of people seeing how to, what to, when to, and why to. People need to see that. So and those are the kinds of things that will give them exposure. The individual must be physically exposed to the message, the concept, the idea, in order for you to be able to persuade them. They have to be exposed to it. They have to live in it. They have to walk it out. They have to see it demonstrated before them. And this takes us back to a leadership concept from one of our other classes, is that we must lead by example. Whatever you want to see reproduced in the lives of your employees, live that. Be that, do that, speak that, expect that. The second one is attention. First one was exposure. The second one is attention. Once exposed, the individual must give attention to the message. They must give attention to the message in order for it to settle in them, in order for it to begin to work in them, and through them, and through their I'll use the word DNA if I could. But once they've been exposed to it, they'll have to give their attention to it. So what this means is there has to be a level of accountability. Due to just the cognitive, the cognitive load, just the load of information, load of responsibilities, load of stuff that the brain and their minds, and information that we're having to process on a day-to-day basis. And that alone and the environmental distractions could easily pull people away and demand for their attention to go into other places and other things. So accountability measures are going to be a must if you're going to reproduce yourself and to other people. You will have to hold people accountable. And I know many times in leadership, people kind of have a challenge with this. And especially if you're in a role of leadership and you're not yet very well developed. I've used this word in confrontation. And confrontation, I am not talking about just, some argumentative criticisms, where you're just coming at people and you're having this uncomfortable conversation, although confrontation may cause a little bit of uncomfortability, but it doesn't necessarily have to be anything negative. People shy away from confrontation because they have this negative idea that it's something that's really bad, but things will have to be confronted. You will have to have the courage. There's another one of our leadership tenets. You'll have to have the courage to be able to speak to individuals if something is going awry and going away and taking away from the direction or from the thing that you're trying to instill and embed in your workforce, in your work atmosphere. You'll have to confront it. And we can do that. We can do that. Well, according to the Bible, it says that we should always speak the truth in love, and not through other employees. Oh man, I know the worst thing for me, and one of my biggest pet peeves is that a leader has an issue with an individual. It's just this one individual. And this one individual kind of wreaks havoc through the whole of the organization. Well, instead of that person, the leader, having the courage now to come to that one individual face to face alone and confront them with their conduct, their behavior, their practices, whatever it is, they will call this meeting with the whole of the department, all 100 people. If you have 100 people, all 100 people have to show up at a meeting just for you to have courage to address, or for you to feel comfortable in addressing this issue with this one person. That's not good leadership. It's not good methods for leadership. If it's an individual, you'll have to deal with the individual. If it's two people, deal with those two people. Hold those two people accountable. And sometimes we try to generalize to keep from to keep from being viewed that perhaps you're picking on someone or you're singling someone out. So you'll just put it out there for everybody where everybody doesn't need it. And so what that does to the people who are doing and following the protocols and doing the things as they should do it, it kind of puts a damper on them. It kind of says, you know what, you're not coming up to speed. It kind of leaves them feeling, well, how does this apply to me? Why am I? And it could kind of put a damper on the morale of the whole. If those kind of practices are done all the time. And then if the people that you're leading see that you don't have the courage, because, people can kind of read things. Eventually, they're going to be able to tell. And you don't want to, in the eyes, of those that you're leading, you don't want to lead them with the idea. You want to reproduce yourself in them, and that is not what you want to cast. That is not something you would want them to pick up and to carry on. So you will have to lead by example. This last sentence, I'll read it again. It says, due to cognitive load and environmental distractions, accountability measures must be in place. We must have those things in place. And sometimes we just have to have those hard conversations. Sometimes we'll have to say no. Sometimes we'll have to make some hard calls. And it's not always, you're not going to always be in a position that you can explain or justify. I'll give you a little sidebar here. As I've said to some of you, you know this about me, that I have traveled over the world, actually, doing missions work in various parts of the world. In some of the most remotest places, some of the most urban, from the highs of the high status to the lows of the low. But nonetheless, I've trained people and I've taken teams of people out into various parts to do the same work. I'm reproducing myself. So there are models in place. Model is a good word. We'll talk about that a little more. But their models and their rules, their there are things that we have in place that if you're going to be a part of the team, that individuals, there are expectations that have to be followed. There is accountability. There are some things that individuals will have to, that may come from different environments, because I don't always know what the background of the individual is, although we do some type of screening and we do some interviewing, but still you don't really know what people are like unless you take them outside of what they live in every day, and then what's really in them will come out of them. So we've had some very interesting situations that have come up in my travels with taking people into various countries and different cultures and different environments. So it's been very interesting. But nonetheless, even while in the midst of being in a foreign country with maybe 20 to 30 people, there are situations that arise that some things are just generalized. You'll have to say it because it's something that, to prevent the thing from catching on and other people doing it. But then that still does not negate the fact that that one individual, one or two individual, that small little group of people, they themselves will have to be addressed, as far as, or reminded. Or sometimes even to the point of being reprimanded, and there has to be consequences. You cannot let bad behavior or ill behavior or inconsiderate behavior or disrespectful behavior. You cannot let that, whether it's big disrespectful to each other or whatever, you cannot let the spirit of those things stay inside of a team, an environment where you're working together with people. You cannot. It should not be anyway. But again, we're all people, and people all have their own little idiosyncrasies, But when it comes for the good of the whole, decisions will have to be made, and it is not always pleasant. You would think it would be if we're all Christians, but it's, we're all at different places in commitment levels. We're all at different places in spirituality, in our level of devotion. All of those things come into play. But as a leader, you just cannot let a renegade just run havoc without addressing the whole of it. Had it been that way, many times we have come very close to the mission being aborted, because there would just be one or two personal issues that people just couldn't seem to get together. So we move and lose focus we give our attention away from what we are there for, to address issues that will spread like wildfire if left unattended. This is a little interesting today, because I'm going a little bit more into this than I intended, but I just feel like I need to cover this today. Anyway, so you want to be able to, once you've exposed people to what your expectation is and what your desire is for them, then you want to be able to make sure that you're having measures in place that you can hold them accountable, that they will give their attention to the matters. Let's move on to the next one. The next one is comprehension. And again, this has to do with your ability as the leader, your ability to communicate, your ability to communicate, your ability and your assurance in and of yourself that you're able to express what it is very clearly, what the expectation is. The recipient must understand the content, the arguments, the implications of the message. They have to understand the content, the arguments, and the implications of the message. It has to be thorough. Now, this sounds like a lot, and it may be in some cases a lot, but you're having people that are coming, that you're going to be counting on, that other people are going to be counting on, the systems are going to be counting on. And so these are the kinds of things, again, In order to get those attitude changes, and in order to get the kind of change, and to get the assurance of our outcome of what our expectation is, these are the things that need to be in place. And as leaders, we have to commit to put them in place. Realizing that you're pacing how you are disseminating information or instructions. Pacing is for you. Pacing is for those that you are leading. Pacing and timing is very important. And if you have too many technicalities, it may hinder the process. And by this, I mean, have you ever been in a situation where there are processes and system in place and everything is running smoothly, and somewhere along the line it gets a bottleneck? Right now what pops into my head is if you were on an assembly line of something and everybody had their specific part that they had to do to make the whole perfect, or make the whole to be the outcome of what is expected, then somewhere on that assembly line, if one person misses their part, or if one person gets behind, it's going to pile up on the line, and it can just be caught up into technicalities. And so we want to make sure that we're having as we're talking about people comprehending, that they don't get caught up in little small technicalities, that they're able to freely take the information in as you're communicating it as clearly as possible as you can, that they're understanding it, and that they're understanding the implications that are there, and that your timing and giving up information is suitable for the environment that you're in. The next one is yielding. And so I'll say, in parentheses here, I wrote acceptance. When a person, an individual, it's important for them to yield and to accept. You want to be sure that you don't have rebels, to the degree, not that someone has to acquiesce to everything that the ways that you or how things are being done, but you want to, because you want to stay open for creativity, but at the same time, the individual must be agreeable with and accept the position that's being advocated. They must be agreeable to it. And this step requires cognitive comparisons of the new message against existing beliefs and attitudes. Like I said, we all come with all kind of our own baggage, and no matter what it is. So what this gentleman is saying here is that that the steps to getting to where a person can accept, you'll have to sometimes take the time to compare what the new message is to maybe versus what they've always done. We've always done it this way, and it's always worked this way, and I was trained to do it this way, and all of that. So you'd have to look at those comparisons and then offer the new way, as the new way. Sometimes it's difficult for people to kind of let go, but there'll have to be people, you'll have to ensure that these are individuals that they're yielding and acceptance, that a yielding and acceptance take place when they are perceived. When a person perceives that the source of the message, when they perceive that the source of the message is valid and trustworthy, they'll be more open to receive. They'll be more open to submit. They'll be more open to yield. They'll be more open to accept. But you can't expect that it will be something that just happens overnight. Respect is earned. true respect is. You know, people can go through the motions of pretending to respect, but true respect is earned, and trust is earned. So the individuals that you're leading and the individuals that you wanted to reproduce yourself in, you model that. And once they get a comfortability that this is really something that's valid. This is really, this person lives this. This person believes this. This person is, you know, this is really something that's real and that's true. And it's trustworthy. Then those people will be more apt to yielding and accepting. The last one is retention. The message must be retained over time. And in parentheses here, I put my own word in here, must be retained over time, repetitively, so that it is not easily forgotten and the temporary change revert to the original status, negating the entire persuasive effort. So retention is king. And when you think about retaining information that you're needing to gain for how to do something, or what a procedure is and what that procedure is, and if it's some very technical, scientific kind of task that comes along with that, my idea is, although the gentleman here says that the message must be retained over time, but and it must be retained over time. It takes a period of time, but it also takes repetitiveness over time, over and over and over and over and over again. I learned this concept from a business coach of mine some years ago, and I love this, so I'll share it with you here, since we're talking about repetitiveness and retention of a message, of the message, or of life. So the idea was to create new habits, and how to create new habits, how to move from one state of being stuck in bad habits to move from that state to creating new habits. And so the whole idea was, it was an acronym, and the acronym was REPO, REPOH, REPO. R is for repetition, E is for easy, P is for God, if my coach knew I drew a blank here. Repetition easy. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Repetition. R is for E. P is for pleasure. Pleasure. O is for often. H is for habit. Repo. REPHO. Repetition, easy. Pleasure, often, habit. So if you do something repetitively, repetition, it becomes easy. And when it becomes easy, you do it more often. And when you do it more often, you find pleasure in it. And when it's pleasurable, it becomes a habit. Did I get that right? I'm embarrassed. If you guys ever see Coach Hollingsworth or read anything, God knows if he knew that I had forgotten this. See what we mean about overtime and doing it? But it was many, many years ago. In my defense, repetition, easy, pleasure, often, habit, repo, right? Whew, got through that. Okay. That was a sidebar anyway, though. It wasn't part of the lesson today. But I thought that was a really good concept, that if you repeatedly do something, it's easy it becomes easy. And as it becomes easy, you do it more often. I mean, we do things that's easy to do. And if we are doing it, the more we do it, the more pleasurable it becomes. The more pleasurable it becomes a habit. And so we can change and create new habits in that way, and retaining information in that way. So back to our lesson for today. Retention, the message must be retained over time, repetitively, so that it is not easily forgotten and the temporary change revert to the original status. We don't want to go backwards. Who wants to backslide? We don't want that. We want to make sure that we're retaining what we've learned so that we can move forward. And you want to make sure that the people that you're instructing and the people that you are endeavoring to reproduce yourself into, that they're moving forward in the process and not digressing in it. Okay, 3 components of reproducing. This is number 2 in our outline today. We're going to look very quickly at 3 components that's needed for reproducing. Number 1 is you must connect. Number 2, you must engage. Number 3, you must model. Connect, engage, model. You want change, you want reproduction process in anything we do. Connect, engage, model. Connect, engage, and model it. Connect to it, the people, engage the people, and model before the people. Simply put. And then our final, of course, we're going to look at the biblical commentary from our scriptural basis for this lesson. And the first one was Genesis chapter 1. So I'm going to give you the assignment for this week in Genesis chapter 1. And I want you to tell me what happened in Genesis chapter 1 in the reproduction process. What was God's mind and what was his idea? And what did he say should happen in the reproduction process? I want you to go through it and tell me what your thoughts are and how you see that working. God himself being the ultimate leader, and him casting vision of what he expected for this creation that he made, how he intended to reproduce and how he did reproduce all of what he created. And then all the things that he created for the man. He put the whole reproduction process for everything, the pattern, the template for reproducing, we find in Genesis chapter 1. The text infers that mankind reproduces after the God kind. That mankind reproduces after the God kind. And the second one we looked at in the New Testament, and we looked at disciple making. That one came from Matthew. We were looking at Matthew chapter 28, verses 19 through 20, and you will find the whole idea of now there's another reproduction process going on, but Jesus now is referring to it as a discipleship. What it takes to reproduce and to make over again, what it takes to make one of the same over and over and over again. And then you're going to find that even in these scriptural references, as I said in Genesis, I want you to go through Genesis chapter 1. I actually want you to look at we can just go from Genesis chapter 1 through let's look at Genesis, start at verse 26 and go through the whole chapter. You don't have to start at verse 1, but you can. But you're going to go to the first chapter of Genesis and go from verse 26 on through to the end of that chapter. And I think you'll get a really good glimpse of the reproductive process. And then in Matthew, you're going to go from chapter 28, and you're going to look at verses 19 and 20. Very simply put, Jesus made the statement, and then you'll see how the two correlates and how they connect. I will write the assignment out. Yeah, I'll write out for you specifically what the assignment should be in the body of the email. Hope you got something out of this today. God bless you. And again, although this is our last lecture, but it's not our last class, so I'll see you next time.